A woman, driving alone through the empty night, feels the weight of an important meeting still lingering on her mind. The meeting had been a turning point in her career. She had just been appointed as the head of a top government agency, the first of her kind in the role. But it was the quiet solitude of the road that challenged her the most. As the darkness pressed in, her thoughts drifted to the weight of the decisions she would soon be making. A seasoned leader, she was no stranger to difficult situations, from international crises to internal power struggles. But what she wasn't prepared for was the looming danger of a remote stretch of highway where her title would be meaningless. Suddenly, flashing red and blue lights appeared in her rearview mirror. She checked her speed, exactly 65 miles per hour. No infraction, no reason to pull over. Yet, the sirens persisted. Her breath caught in her chest as she slowly steered her car to the side of the road. She had been in tense situations before, but this was different. She knew her rights, but she also knew that sometimes those rights weren't enough. As the officer approached, she could see his stiff posture and hand hovering near his holster. His flashlight beam pierced the night, blinding her for a moment. She rolled down the window, keeping her hands in plain sight. "Evening, officer," she said, keeping her voice calm but firm. The officer didn't greet her, didn't offer an explanation. "License and registration," he demanded, his tone detached. A warning signal went off in her mind. "May I ask why I've been pulled over?" she replied, her heart thudding quietly against her ribcage. The officer didn't answer, instead repeating his demand, his stare unwavering. Her instincts screamed. This wasn't a routine stop. She was trained to handle situations like this, to navigate tension, but this felt different. "Sir, I'm reaching for my purse," she said, her voice steady, though her mind was already mapping out her next move. No response. She carefully retrieved her wallet and handed over her identification and a special badge she knew he would recognize. The officer barely glanced at the badge before his eyes flicked back to her face. "CIA," he muttered under his breath. She nodded once. His next words only made the situation worse. "Step out of the vehicle." Her pulse quickened, but she remained composed. This wasn't a traffic stop. This was something more. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharpening as she leaned forward slightly. The officer's hand shifted even closer to his gun. "Step out," he repeated, his voice devoid of any warmth. Monica could feel the control slipping. She had faced men like him before, men who believed authority was about exerting power, not protecting it. This wasn't about the law. It was about who was in charge. And right now, it wasn't her. Another set of headlights approached. Relief flooded her, but quickly turned to unease when she saw who emerged from the second vehicle. Another officer, tall and broad-shouldered, without a name tag or body cam. This wasn't backup. This was reinforcement. The officers exchanged a look, one that sent a chill through her. She had seen that look before, the unspoken understanding that the rules didn't apply here. "This the problem?" the new officer asked, voice low. The first officer just smirked, just a non-compliant driver. "Ma'am, step out of the car," one of the officers barked. Not director, or even Mississippi. Just ma'am. Disposable. Replaceable. Her fingers tightened on the steering wheel as she calculated her next move. She knew what would happen if she made a wrong move. They would write their own version of events, and it would be the last story anyone heard about her. But she didn't make a wrong move. The first officer grabbed her wrist too fast, too harshly. The pain shot through her arm, and her reflexes took over. She jerked back, shouting, "Get your hands off me!" Before she could react further, the second officer's hand reached for his radio. "Non-compliant suspect," he declared, already shaping the story they would tell. And then the gun was out. The cold steel of it hovered near her face, and time seemed to stop. But then a voice broke through the tension. "I'm recording this." She turned her head slightly. A man stood on the edge of the road, phone raised, capturing the entire scene. The officers hesitated. The uncertainty was palpable. More sirens echoed, but this time it wasn't for them. More officers arrived, surrounding the scene. And then recognition flickered in one of the new officer's eyes. "Director Hayes," he said, and everything changed in an instant. The first officer's weapon dropped to the ground, and he was quickly arrested, handcuffed in the gravel. His partner was placed on suspension while the investigation began. By morning, the footage had gone viral. By noon, the Justice Department had opened an investigation. By nightfall, the first officer faced charges. Monica had seen the slow wheels of justice before, but not today. Today, justice fought back and won. As the dust settled and the investigation unfolded, one thing became clear. This wasn't just a moment of personal triumph for Monica. It was a pivotal turning point, a moment that reflected the systemic issues that had been allowed to fester for far too long. Justice, for all its complexity, isn't just about the individual case or the person standing at the front of the camera. It's about the collective will to hold the powerful accountable, to speak up when things are wrong, and to ensure that no one is left to face the system alone. For Monica Hayes, the aftermath was a whirlwind. There were meetings with high-ranking officials, discussions with her legal team, and the endless media attention. The whole world had witnessed that night in the dark, and now they were watching how the narrative would unfold. The officers who had escalated the situation beyond reason were being held accountable, but the larger questions lingered. How many others had been in her shoes? How many people had faced this kind of abuse, their voices silenced, their stories ignored? It was clear to Monica that this incident was more than just an isolated occurrence. The badge, the gun, the title, none of them should ever be used as a tool to dominate another person. This was about more than just police brutality or racial injustice. It was about a culture that allowed this behavior to persist. It was about the unchecked power some wield over others, and how easy it is to dismiss people when they don't fit a certain mold or standard. Monica's status as the first Black woman to hold such a prestigious role in government gave her a platform, a powerful one, but she knew that with it came the weight of history. Every step she took, every move she made, would be scrutinized not just for her actions, but for the legacy she represented. In that moment on the side of the road, she realized just how much more was at stake. It wasn't just about being a figurehead for change, but about being the change itself, about pushing for a society where fairness and equality were not just words, but lived truths. The viral video, the public outcry, the justice that came swiftly, it all spoke to something larger than any single person or incident. It was a reminder of the power of visibility, of the importance of standing up and recording the truth. Without the man with the phone, the story would have been written by those who had the authority to control the narrative. But with that simple act of recording, everything changed. A chain of events was set into motion that could no longer be ignored. The case opened a larger conversation. It wasn't just about one rogue officer. It was about the system that had allowed such behavior to continue unchecked. And as more people began to speak out, more videos surfaced, more voices rose in unity. The story of that night became a symbol of resistance, of standing up against systemic abuse, of calling for accountability from those in power. As the case moved through the courts, Monica remained committed to the cause. But she knew that real change wasn't going to come from a single investigation or one viral moment. It was going to take an overhaul of the systems that allowed these abuses to continue. It would take policy change, community reform, and an ongoing commitment to justice that reached far beyond the headlines. She knew this was just the beginning. The night she had been pulled over would always stay with her, as would the lessons she'd learned. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. Hope that the fight for justice, no matter how long or difficult, was worth every ounce of energy it demanded. It was a fight for those who couldn't speak up, for those who had been silenced, for the communities that had suffered in silence for far too long. Monica Hayes was not just a leader in title. She was a leader in action, a woman who showed the world that even in the darkest moments, there is always room for justice to rise. And that, perhaps, was the most powerful victory of all. As the months passed, the ripple effects of Monica's experience continued to spread far beyond the confines of that lonely highway. The media coverage eventually quieted, but the conversation never really stopped. Her story had ignited something, a spark that had long been buried beneath layers of institutional indifference. People across the nation, particularly those from marginalized communities, found themselves asking the difficult questions: how many times has this happened before? How many stories have gone untold, buried beneath the weight of systemic power? For Monica, the personal impact of that night was still fresh, but the public momentum kept her going. She saw her role as more than just leading an agency or fighting for individual justice. It was now about leading a movement. Her story had become a symbol, a beacon for those who had been ignored for far too long, for those who had felt powerless against an unforgiving system. It became a reminder that real change doesn't happen in the quiet moments, but in the loud, disruptive actions that challenge the status quo. Monica used her newfound platform to demand change at every level. She spoke out against the militarization of police, against racial profiling, and in favor of policy reform. The fight she had faced on the side of the road was no longer hers alone. It was a fight for every person who had been treated as less than human by the very systems designed to protect them.